you're all set.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie.
Of course.
All right, Louis, we just want to make sure it was my first time using this new setup we have here for interviews, so I want to make sure I was doing everything correct.
Okay. Well, I see we're on and we're recording, so.
We are on and recording now, so everything is good to go.
Okay.
First of all, I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it. And, you know, one of the first things, you know, I want to mention is that open letter you sent to the American people, and that's what this is mainly going to be about. So the letter mentions that the proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 cuts NOAA by close to 30%. So can you give me an overview of what this would mean for NOAA?
Yeah, well, you know, first of all, the National Weather Service is one of 5 main line organizations within NOAA, and the collaborative relationship amongst those 5 is essential for any particular line office meeting its mission. Now, the Weather Service has a 24/7 mission directed towards serving the American public. The fact that the Weather Service is a science-based service agency, we're very heavily dependent on the advances in the science of meteorology, the science of Earth system science, you know, the combination of oceans, land, atmosphere, cryosphere now is all being brought into this forecast process. And NOAA, you know, has an incredible amount of research that's done in that area, and it's been essential for the Weather Service to advance through the recent modernization, you know, in the mid-90s into the early part of this century, the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program, you know, things like that, essential components of the advancements of the overall services that are then presented to the American public. So, you know, this is a relationship, a collaborative relationship that's extremely important, and we are concerned, and there are specific areas that have been cut. The research aspect of NOAA, advances in the satellite technology, the geostationary satellite that people see on their TV. There was a sounder now that was proposed for the geostationary orbit, which would give us a measure of temperature and moisture in the atmosphere on a much more a higher frequency basis, time basis, that's now being proposed to be cut. Now, remember, this is the president's budget. It's not the budget that's been approved by Congress yet. So but we are concerned, and the cuts to the Weather Service itself is, I think, a problem that needs more attention before we go through further cuts, especially to the workforce. So those were the kinds of concerns that we were seeing, and it was one of the motivations for putting the letter together.
Okay. You know, you kind of talked about this here, the importance of the interconnectedness of NOAA. I don't think a lot of people understand that, though, right? I think that some people think, you know, there's always room to cut in certain areas, not realizing how everything's interconnected with inside NOAA and the National Weather Service. So, for example, how would you explain to someone, you know, we've already seen certain National Weather Service offices forego their balloon launches. How would you explain to someone how, say, a balloon launch in Alaska could affect the forecast accuracy here in models in West Michigan?
Okay, well, a couple of points, and I will get back to the balloons. You know, when I was the director of the Weather Service, prior to that, I was director of the National Centers for Environmental Prediction. Prior to that, I was in, you know, head of a forecast office, a large forecast office for the time. I went through the modernization with the National Weather Service and within NOAA. We're always looking to ensure that we're spending the taxpayers' money wisely, and we have to go through a process. We don't always get the budget we want, right? We always would like more, but we always manage to the budget we got, and we executed our mission statement of protecting lives and property through the provision of observations, forecasts, and warnings within that budget. So that's a really important point. With respect to the research component, it's I mentioned the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program. There's a lab down in Miami, AOML, that really focuses on the use of better observations and new science, working with the Modeling Center, which is within the Weather Service, um, and other modeling groups within NOAA to bring those observations into improved hurricane forecasts. And we've seen tremendous improvements over the last 15 years. And it does take a while. This is not a light switch kind of approach. The research takes time. Testing it within an operational environment takes time. But I would point out that the improvements in the hurricane forecast over the past 10, 15 years have been astounding, both in track and now intensity. People are preparing for potential hurricanes before they even form. So it's something that we feel very strongly about, that we need that kind of connectivity, not only to deal with today's forecast challenges, but work towards the future. With respect to, what does balloon launches in Alaska mean to forecast in Michigan? Every local forecast, every local forecast that people want, not only for tomorrow, but out to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days in advance, like the emergency management community starts preparing for oncoming extreme events, the potential for those events, 5, 6, and 7 days in advance. You need a global observing system to do that. You need that observing system not only in the atmosphere, you need it in the oceans, you need land, you need cryosphere type of. It's a global modeling process that then brings the information, the system development, its movement to the local forecast issue. So, and keeping that in mind, the backbone of that observing system has been and continues to be the radiosonde, the balloon launches, which gives you at very high vertical resolution temperature, moisture, and wind information that are independently measured as that balloon goes up. And that becomes a very important point for its use in numerical models. So, um, balloon launches, not only in Alaska, but around the globe, are important. And what we're seeing is that as the staff has been reduced in these local offices, the they've actually have had to cut back on the balloon launches to keep other parts of their operations going, and that has a significant that has the potential to have significant impact. And there's already some evidence that the models are not uh, reaching the scores that we would want to see them reach. And I mean, the work has to be done to see if it is actually the decrease in balloon launches that's contributing to it. But there's a pretty good correlation in the decreasing skill we're seeing in some of the models related to this potential issue. So I just want to keep everybody informed with respect to it. Yes, the local forecast is absolutely critical, and it comes out of the offices around the United States. But you do need a global observing system to make sure that the forecast is as accurate as it can be, not only for tomorrow, but out in time. That gives us the possibility of anticipating extreme events and getting communities ready for those events.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like weather systems are moving. It's not just what's going on here, it's what's going on downstream that's going to impact you down the road. So, you kind of mentioned it a little bit here, but there's already been some cuts to the National Weather Service. I know that was kind of another thing talked about in the letter. Is that concerning to you as we get into, hurricane season and deeper into severe weather season as well?
Well, it was not only the magnitude of the cuts, which have been ongoing. It's not only the initial release of the new employees was something that was very unsettling to all of us, and in fact, it was the main motivating point that got five of us, five former directors of the National Weather Service, together to write the open letter. All right, because these people, you know, were the best of the crop of people that were, applying to the Weather Service. When I left in 2022, there were these positions were opening up. In some of these positions, we had 100+ people apply for it, right? And it's not only the newer people, the younger people coming out of the university environment, people coming out of the military are part of that group of people applying for these positions. People from the private sector. We're big supporters of the private sector. All our data and information and collaboration involves the private sector across every aspect of the observation and forecast process. So with very short notice, some of these people got notice with 15 minutes. They show up at a shift and then they handed an email. This was stunning, and increases the risk of an office not operating properly, especially in light of the severe weather season that we're in. The fire weather's year round now, right? And the oncoming hurricane season, and we just had these flooding, rainfall events, etc. So it's really important that we keep the best and the brightest people coming into the Weather Service, and then to make sure that we can keep them there and not just dismiss them the way they were. And then since then, there've been many more people through various other actions have left. So yes, that increases the concern and it increases the risk. Nobody can predict when when the rubber band will break. You can pull it, you can pull it, you can pull it, and then one time it breaks, it's done. All right, so I can't predict when that's going to happen, and the chances of it happening will increase as the number of employees are reduced and the stress factor, the morale factor weighs on them, whether they can just keep up, especially if there are multiple events going on at the same time. So it is of concern. It's concern to all of us who signed that letter, that the way the changes were made, the way people were released, increases the risk of mission failure. And that's what we're concerned about.
Okay, and you almost brought it up a little bit too, but new people coming in, that's key to really any business, any organization. I've heard from some students too who might seem a little swayed or a little nervous to get into this line of field, especially going into the government with inside weather or NOAA research for climate, stuff like that. Do you think that could lead to impacts down the road?
Well, I've just pointed out that the National Weather Service, actually all weather services, whether it's private sector or within the government, addressing the mission of saving lives and property, is a science-based service organization. We're talking about applied math and physics when we get to understanding the weather and attempting to predict it. Okay, so and it involves these large computer models that people need to have an understanding of, even if they're not modeling. How do you use the model? How do you best deal with inaccuracies or uncertainties? How do you use post-processing? This is all something that people get now as part of their degree process, and as they want to become a forecaster or want to become a member of the team, because a lot of technology, IT aspects of it as well, to make this mission possible, right? So so newer people that were released sends a bad signal. The language that was used in terms of the release, that their skill sets not needed anymore, or whatever they were posting early on in the process, certainly sends a message out, and to people who dream about becoming meteorologists, okay, that's been their life's goal, is not only become a meteorologist, but for many people, me included, to want to work in the Weather Service and be able to bring these better products and services to the American public. So I I would just urge that the students, um, you know, keep on keeping on. Try to follow your dream, and and find a place. And let's hope that we can get back to a realization of how important this is. The other point I'd like to make, that I haven't made already, is that one of the reasons it's hard to say, hey, this is when the system is going to break. With the way all these people have been released, the chilling messages sent to the newer people as they were escorted out of the building, is that, you know, it, I can say that the people in the Weather Service, their dedication to mission, their dedication to the mission of the National Weather Service, which is to provide observations, forecasts, and warnings, and impact-based decision support services to the emergency management and public safety communities at every government level, is a mission that they embrace. That's what brings them to work. And when they have that kind of dedication to mission, the people that are left behind as the other people are escorted out of the building, these people are demoralized as well. Their colleagues and friends now have just been let go. All right. Their dedication to mission is unbelievable. It's been studied. Okay, there's a chapter in the book Mission Mystique about the mission of the National Weather Service and how people working in the Weather Service are dedicated to it. Reviews by McKinsey and Company showed this at levels that they've never seen before in other organizations. The people that are left behind, their dedication is still there, and they're going to try to make this thing work one way or the other. But at some point, the stress factor is going to be something could get missed. The chances of something being missed in a very critical situation is there. So, um, yeah, but the younger people, and the newer people coming in, people retiring from the military that are needed to keep an infrastructure going 24/7. I believe, you should still live your dream, and let's hope that as we get through this, there'll be a realization that we really need to sustain this agency and the way it serves the American public.
So, speaking of how things affect people, right? I've personally heard from some National Weather Service employees that they're not allowed to talk about what the proposed cuts would mean for the National Weather Service. You kind of touched on it already, but what would you say? What would you have to say about, the current fear in so many National Weather Service employees about speaking out?
So, one of the things that's a basic um, rule when you're in the executive branch, which the Weather Service is in, and I was a senior manager, senior leader in that. When a president's budget is released, that's for the next year. That's the only budget you can talk about. That's the only a budget process that you can actually address in a sense of backing, whether it's good, bad, or horrible. All right, because if you're speaking about what you think you really need, etc., um, before a budget is actually passed by the Hill, that's you're lobbying. Okay, you're in the executive branch, basically sending signals to the legislative branch that you just can't do. Now, some people take it even more. They work behind the scenes to say, "Hey, I don't want to deal with that budget. This is what I really need." You can't do that. All right. So the fact that they're not speaking up is a rule of the game that applies. Uh, but we know, they speak to friends. They might not do an interview like this. They might not answer your questions. They might talk with other people who have just retired from the Weather Service. It's that some of the information that I hear is coming forward. But they can't do it for attribution. It's just you can't. Now, even like when you go into, everybody's now going to be focused on the budget for 2026, which the fiscal year starts in October. When you get to that point and they don't have a budget, they can't talk about the president's budget. They can't talk about. It's got to be the continuing resolution. Whatever is in the operating budget, whatever comes from the Hill, whatever finally gets signed off, that's what they can talk about in public. All right. So the real question today is, what's the Hill going to do? All right, with these budget requests that are coming from the executive branch. So, that's, for people inside the government, they can't go to the Hill. That's the way it is, and that's the way it's been, and that's the way we all had to operate.
Okay, I appreciate you putting that into context there. My next question would have to be, and I know it was touched on, and you've talked about the goal of the National Weather Service and NOAA, but what would be the worst case scenario for NOAA and the National Weather Service if this budget does get approved?
I think the worst case scenario, because there is still going to be a weather service at the end of the day. So the worst case scenario, from what I'm seeing on the outside looking in, is that the new science and technology aspects, that we need that flow. We always had that process working. You got new research and technology out there. It's got to be assessed within the operational community. It just isn't plugged in and then tried out, and everything else is shut off. There's always this testing it with the users. Is it still meeting their needs? Is it improving what's being provided as an impact-based decision support services to the emergency management community? Everybody's part of that process. I think that process is at risk. It's called the research to operations process. If you have a depleted force in the weather service, how are they going to try to keep going with respect to today's weather, and at the same time be part of the team that's assessing and testing all the new technology advances and science advances that are still on the horizon? And I'll give you an example with the artificial intelligence. That's not going to be just a plug and play kind of thing. There's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done to see how that information that is extracted out of models, out of new observing systems, et cetera, and brought to the forecasters for assisting them in the decision process. There's going to be incredible opportunities there, but you just can't parachute in with a new technique and expect it to work. So that's something that I think I'd be concerned about. The other important part of this is the efficiency aspect has also been brought forward, and the need to decentralize at certain aspects of the service that's provided by the National Weather Service. You really got to get information down to the local levels, because that's where most of the decisions are made for saving lives and mitigating property loss. It's made at the local levels. The national emergency management groups like in FEMA and whatnot, they pre-position assets for local communities to deal with the situation during and then after and during the recovery. States help coordinate that, but the decisions for people are made at the local levels. So you really do need this broad approach, and you've got unique aspects at local levels that have to be brought into that decision process. So like you're in, Michigan, you're surrounded by the Great Lakes. Okay, so that becomes an important part. And there was a laboratory in Ann Arbor that deals with the Great Lakes aspect. So those kinds of things I feel are going to be put at risk if people really aren't thinking through what these labs actually do to help our understanding and ability to predict.
Okay. I'm going to bring it I'm going to bring you into an event that happened here about 1 year ago in West Michigan. We had two high-end EF2 tornadoes. They were on the ground simultaneously. For some areas, this may seem a little more normal. For us, this was pretty unusual. In fact, it led the National Weather Service to issue the first tornado emergency in Michigan during that event. How do you think operations at the office would have to change if cuts were made?
Well, I noted earlier that the dedication to mission brings Weather Service people into work. That those types of cases that you just referred to, have a lead time. It's not just the day of the event. Outlooks put forward now 3, 4, 5, 6 days for extreme, the possibility of extreme tornadic or severe weather events, and then you work towards that. So I suspect that the offices will do everything possible to have the right people on duty for events like that. The issue gets compounded when what happens if you have a severe weather event and a flash flood event going on at the same time. All right. Those are two different forecast processes. All right. With eyes on target. And there are examples now where, there are offices, even this past April in Oklahoma, dealing with fire weather potential, and severe weather in different parts, not only of the state, but of the same area that a forecast office is responsible for. That's where you get into a risk factor that I think is unacceptable, because you're going to miss something. And so it's not just that you have this one kind of event going on that's a life-threatening, but there are chances, and I'm speaking to these because they've actually happened. Okay, we're not making this up as a potential worst-case scenario. These types of things are happening, and they're happening more often. So that would be a kind of scenario that I would be very concerned about.
Okay. And I have one more question for you. I think the current administration would argue that cuts have to be made. They've been very vocal about that. But what would your argument be for why the National Weather Service should be spared from these cuts over maybe some other organizations?
Well, I want to say two things with respect to that. First of all, the National Weather Service, when I left, was in the low 4,000s in terms of the number of people in the National Weather Service. Running an organization, operating an organization, 24/7 by 365. There's no downtime. Okay, for an area from Guam across the Pacific, with Hawaii in there, of course, up to the North Shores of Alaska, all the way across into the Middle Atlantic, down to the Caribbean, serving over 330 million people. That's about 4,200 it was, or something like that, or 4,300. When I was in charge of the Weather Service, I hear today it's less than 4,000. Serving 330 million people over a domain, about half of the Northern Hemisphere. Okay, maybe a little bit less than a half. That's extraordinary. All right, for 11 service areas, from space weather, and that's important, all the way down to the marine environment, sun to the sea. Okay, that's a big domain space. So it's not just what's going on in the hurricane season or what the fire weather situation could be like, what extreme events could be happening, flooding, severe storms, and winter and blizzards. I mean, all these are different service areas that aviation forecasting, everybody needs a flight plan before they take off in an airplane. It takes weather information to make that happen. So this is extraordinary. And we support a private sector, which is the largest private sector in the world, that now produces products and influences the weather service ability across every aspect of the forecast process. They get every bit of data that's produced by the Weather Service, with its observations, forecasts, or warnings, to serve, their tailored products to specific aspects of how we live in this country, agriculture, green energy, whatever. Okay, so I think it's already pretty efficient. However, we're always looking for ways to ensure that we're doing it, we're spending the taxpayer money to meet that mission, right? Not because we want to do something new or do something different or whatever. It's all focused on the mission. And I do believe that the taxpayer is getting the services, extraordinary services, for the amount of money that's being spent today. Okay, so yes, you're going to go in and defend the budget to want to do that. You always wish for more money, but you operate by what you're allocated by Congress, what you have to report back on in terms of your spend plan, and then you got to show the results. All right, so you're held accountable, but you have to understand that that the Weather Service, that NOAA, the people I worked with understood that you operated with the money you got from Congress, with the appropriation language that even directed, in many cases, where that and how that money is spent, and then we will report it back to Congress accordingly. So that's what we're facing, is that people are making decisions that that work against the authorization appropriation we already got from Congress. So it's not a matter of saying, hey, we don't, we always need more money, and that's not the issue as far as I'm concerned. I think that we should make this process work. That's been working, I think, in the behalf of the American public with respect to weather services. Continue to make that process work.
I agree. Is there anything else that you wanted to point out that we didn't get into in this interview? The floor is open to you here.
No, I think I've spoken. I might just point out the one last comment I'll make here is that the five of us, I worked for the other four weather service directors. I can safely say that what motivated us to come to work every day was the mission and the people, the great people who are out there making that mission work on a 24/7 basis. And to see the way they've been treated, we believe that we're putting that mission at risk. And I think people should understand how important that mission is to all the people who work in the Weather Service, and how those people brought us as leaders to work every day. So what really concerns us is that they they don't want to fail. I can tell you that right now. They'll live in the office if they have to in an extreme event to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. But they need to be supported in a way that ensures that we don't have those kind of risk factors in their way of meeting the mission. And that's what really motivated the letter, the public letter that we all signed, we all developed and signed together. So I just want to make sure that people understand it's the people that we're concerned about, the people in the Weather Service, in NOAA, that are working towards these missions that, quite frankly, are extraordinary accomplishments to be able to get people prepared for and properly respond to an oncoming extreme event. So that's what I hope people in the United States understand.
Yeah. A lot of people, maybe don't realize it's like we're here to protect you, everyone in this country. So that's the main goal there. Can you just go ahead and say your name? I want to make sure I get it perfect on air.
Okay. Yeah, it's Louis Uccellini.
Okay. I appreciate it, Louis. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and speaking out upon this matter. And I will be putting this together today. It will probably air sometime on Thursday or Friday. My news director is still trying to figure that out, but I really appreciate your time and you speaking with me today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.